Okay, so let's get started with the question number 1, accounting for liabilities. We'll see what it is. An entity has determined that it will cost approximately rupees 15 million to clean up a site that has been contaminated as a result of its operation. What attribute should this cleanup have a provision to be made in this respect? ව්‍යාපාර ආයතනයක් තියෙනවා. තට ඒ ව්‍යාපාර ආයතනය තමන්ගේ ව්‍යාපාර කටයුතු හේතුවෙන් පරිසරයට හානියක් සිද්ධ වෙලා තියෙනවා. එතකොට ව්‍යාපාරය ඇස්තමේන්තු කරනවා මේ හානිය සම්බන්ධයෙන් ක්ලීන් අප් එකක් කරන්න රුපියල් මිලියන 15ක් වගේ වැය වෙයි කියලා. එතකොට අහනවා මේ සම්බන්ධයෙන් වෙන් කිරීමක් කිරීමට තියෙන්න ඕනේ අත්‍යවශ්‍ය සාධක මොනවද කියන එක. What attribute should this cleanup have a provision to be made in this respect? So that test your knowledge on what you call that the provision. So you can use your knowledge on provision and you can answer this question. So in order to make a provision, so what must be the condition that it should be there? The very first condition. It's a straightforward question. So without taking much time, let's discuss that. So the first condition is that, so in order to make a provision, there must be a present obligation, isn't it? So in order to make a provision, there are certain conditions. The very first condition, we call it, there should be a present obligation. There must be a present obligation. වර්තමාන බැඳීමක් තියෙන්න ඕනේ. ඒකට ඒක තමයි පළවෙනි කාරණාව. There should be a present obligation. So in this question, if you see, do they have a present obligation? The question has not given the context sufficiently, but so you know the present obligation can exist due to two main reasons, right? The first reason is that it can be a kind of obligation that stems from the legal source. So therefore, legal obligation are there. Legal obligation as a matter of contract, by way of the Parliament Act. So the sources of this legal obligation you can take by way of a contract, by way of a Parliament Act, and also you can take other laws as well. So therefore it is something to do with the law. The other obligation type, we call it, it is the constructive obligation. Constructive obligation. So when you come to this particular question, in the question it has not mentioned about any legal source. There it does not mention that in the country in which this business entity operate, there's a kind of environmental law. So if the business entity, if a particular business entity contaminate or pollute the environment, they should restore that, something like that. So it is not there. So therefore here what we can assume is that there can be a kind of constructive obligation. Constructive obligation is an obligation that goes beyond the legal obligation. So the business organization would attain to set certain obligations. It's because of their ethical business conduct. So one of the main reasons could be that is their ethical business conduct. Ethical business conduct. So they concern about the environment. They concern about the environment. So therefore, they may be having a kind of past practice or kind of published policy or a kind of recently specific current statement or something like that So they may create a valid expectation in the community in which that get affected due to this pollution, due to this contamination of the environment. So therefore, here we can reasonably assume that the entity is having a constructive obligation. So මේ question එකේ ඇත්තටම දීලා තියෙන තොරතුරු මදි අපිට මේ පළවෙනි කාරණාව තීරණය කරන්නනේ. මම අප question එකට ගියොත් present obligation එකක් තියෙනවද කියන එක තීරණය කරන්න අපිට දීලා තියෙන තොරතුරු ප්‍රමාණවත් මදි. ඒතකොට legal obligation එකක් තියෙනවා කියලා අපිට කියන්න බෑ. මොකද මෙතන කියලා නැහැ යම්කිසි law එකක් තියෙනවා කියන එක. උදාහරණයක් විදිහට සමහර අවස්ථාවලදී ව්‍යාපාර ආයතන කටයුතු කරන රටේ ඇතුළේ තියෙන්න පුළුවන් පාරිසරික නීති රීති. ඒකට ඒ වගේ තත්ත්වයක් තුළ අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම legal obligation එකක් තියෙනවා entity එකක් environment එක contaminate කරොත් අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම ඒක restore කරන්න ඕනේ. නමුත් මෙතන එහෙම දෙයක් පේන්නේ නැහැනේ. ඒකට අපිට ඒක ගන්න බෑ. ඒකට අපිට පේන දෙයක් තමයි අපිට assume කරන්න පුළුවන් තත්ත්වයක් තමයි entity එක දැන් cost එකත් estimate කරලා තියෙන්නේ. එහෙමනම් entity එක මේ event එකට attend වෙනවා කියලා පේනවා. එහෙමනම් මෙතන තියෙන්න පුළුවන් obligation එක තමයි constructive obligation. අපි කියනවා constructive obligation එකක් කියන්නේ මොකක්ද? So it's a obligation that the business entities would attend as a result of its past practice. The past practice එකක් විදිහට අපි ව්‍යාපාර කටයුතු නිසා පරිසරයට හානියක් වුණොත් අපි ඒක රීස්ටෝර් කරනවා වෙන්න පුළුවන්. එහෙම නැත්නම් ව්‍යාපාර ආයතනයේ තියෙන්න පුළුවන් published policy එකක්. If we contaminate the environment, we'll be restoring that. And also, the current specific statement is also good enough. So therefore, here the point is, there must be a kind of present obligation. The obligation can be legal obligation or constructive obligation. But the question asks, what must be the condition that should be there? So therefore, we can say that the first condition is that there must be a present obligation. It could be like the legal obligation or constructive obligation. Then the second condition, what is that? It is probable that in the settlement, in the settlement, it is probable that the resources embodying future economic benefits will flow from the entity. In the settlement, it is probable that the resources embodying future economic benefits will flow from the entity. So that is the second condition. So when it comes to the settlement of this provision, so it is probable that the resources embodying future economic benefits will flow from the entity. The resources would be taken out of the entity. So when you are going to settle their obligation, that may be the case. Right. Then the third one, it's about the reliability criterion. We call it that the amount of the obligation can be estimated reliably. We call it the amount of the obligation or the value of the obligation. The obligation can be measured reliably. So that is the third condition. Hence, in order to make a provision for a given business circumstance or a given business scenario, there must be three conditions. Three conditions must be satisfied. The first one, there should be a present obligation. It can be either a legal obligation or constructive obligation. The second one is it's about the probability criterion in the settlement. The resources would be taken out of the business. The third one is the kind of we call it the reliability criterion. The amount of the obligation can be, we call it slightly modify this, we call it estimated reliability, right? Estimated reliability, not measured, estimated, no, because it's a kind of provision. So therefore we are reasonably estimating that. So that is in fact one of the distinction of the provision and other liabilities. When come to the other liabilities, so like trade payables, the accrued expenses, those you can measure reliably. But here, when it comes to the provision would involve a kind of estimation. So therefore, it is the amount of the obligation can be estimated reliably. So those are the three conditions that must be there. Okay. So if you have any question and concern, when and where, you are free to ask any, right? Okay. Let's look at the second question. The Apollo PLC sells washing machines. These goods retail at rupees 25,000 each and are sold with 1 year warranty. In the entity's experience, 20% of the machines sold require some form of repair at an average cost of rupees 2,000 per each machine. Okay. For the year ended 31st March 2019, the entity has sold 250 machines. During the year, yes, then for the next year, during the year ended 31st March 2020, the company has paid rupees 70,000 as warranty provision. So company had to incur 70,000 as warranty provision. As at 31st March 2020, the entity still expect 20% of the machine sold require some form of repair at an average cost of 2,000 per each machine for the year ended 31st March 2020. The entity has sold 300 machines for the year ended 31st March 2020. Okay, so if the situation as such, let's look at the requirement. Identify the expected cost of repair and prepare the journal entries to record them for as at 31st March 2019. Okay, the first requirement is you to come up with the journal entries to record the provision. නම් මුලින්ම අවශ්‍ය වෙන්නේ අපි 2019 අවුරුද්දට journal entry එක අපි එහෙනම් journal entry එක produce කරමු. අපි account එකක් හැදුවොත් අපිට මේක පහසුවෙන් තේරුම් ගන්න පුළුවන්. එහෙනම් provision account එක අපි create කරමු 2019ට අදාළව මුලින්ම. So would like you to take like 5 minutes time and try this out. Then we'll discuss that. හරි එහෙනම් උතාලා මුලින්ම විනාඩි 5ක් වගේ අරගෙන 2019 අවුරුද්දට අදාළ ජර්නල් එන්ට්‍රීස් ටික ප්‍රොඩියුස් කරන්න බලන්න. So if you had get the answer, you can indicate that in the chat. Then we can discuss on that for 2019. So what was the provision that you have made? Sorry, the amount. The Apollo PLC sells washing machines. They retail at 25,000. In the entity's experience, 20% of the machines sold require some form of repair at an average cost of 2,000 per each machine. And for the year ended 31st March 2019, the entity has sold 250 machines. And it is pretty straightforward. So for the year ended 31st March 2019, if you work that out, you can see each would require 2,000, and you have sold 250, but out of that you expect only 20% of them would have would require the kind of repair. So accordingly, how many machines that would require the repair, according to your estimates, that is 50. Each would cost you 2,000. So therefore, you need to make a provision for 100,000. So the journal entry would go like, you can take the debits and the credit entry. So the debit entry, it goes product warranty expenses. So product warranty expenses, it's 100,000, and provision for warranty, we can get 100,000. So if I want to put this in an account, so this is for the year ended 31st December, so 31st March 2019. So this is to recognize warranty expenses or warranty provision. Okay, so if I want to take account for that, it would go like this. So account එකක් identify කරොත් කොහොමද ඒක සිද්ධ වෙන්නේ? Warranty provision. So you can see that in the first year you take 100,000. It comes from warranty expenses. For the year ended, it becomes balance carried forward. At the end of the year, you have 100,000 over there. And you may start the next year with a balance brought forward, 100,000. Okay. Then let's see what is the situation for 2020. During the year ended 31st March 2020, the company has paid rupees 70,000 for warranty provision. So in relation to this warranty provision, you had to incur some expenses in repairing that. So you had to incur certain expenses. So in that, the following year, the year ended 31st March 2020, you have spent 70,000. So the cash gets credit, here it gets debit, 70,000. So you made a provision, you can take the things against that. අපි provision එකක් කරලා තියෙන්නේ. එතකොට අපිට ඒකට against මේ values ටික ගන්න පුළුවන් නේ. So මේක තමයි 2019 වලින් වෙන එක. දැන් අපි 2020 වල balance brought forward තියෙන ඔන්න 70,000 ගෙවුවා. ඊට පස්සේ කියනවා as at 31st March 2020, the entity still expect 20% of the machines sold require some form of repair at an average cost of 2,000 per each machine. එතකොට 2020 මාර්තු 31 වෙනකොටත් හිතනවා විකුණන මැෂින් වලින් 120කට අවශ්‍ය වෙයි කියලා repair එකක් at average cost of 2,000. For the end at 31st March 2020, the entity has sold 300 machines. The machines 300 විකුණලා තියෙනවා. ඒකට අපි ගත්තොත් ඒක 120ක් එකකට 2000. මේක තමයි අපේ provision as at 31st March 2020. ඒකට අපි work out කරොත් 300 120ෙන් වැඩි කරා 2000ෙන් වැඩි කරා. 120,000. So therefore you can have the balance carried forward of 120,000. So consequently, for the year ended 31st March 2000, so $190,000 on the debit, credit side 190,000. Only the movement in the account is what you recognize as the expense. So consequently, 90,000 would be required. 90,000 would be required. So you can take that to the P&L. So therefore, for the year ended 31st March 2020, you can recognize the warranty expense. It is simply the movement in the account. The movement has comes as 90,000, and that is 90,000. For the end of 31st March 2020, you need to recognize 90,000 as the expense. So that's how we do it for the following year. Right. So is it clear that anything you want clarification, the things that you're not comfortable with? I believe that it is also a kind of straightforward question. Is that clear? So some form of communication is required. So just tell me whether you are getting this or not. Then if not, I can further explain. If you're getting that, that's fine. So it's a very basic application of provision, right? Okay. Okay, fine. You're getting that. Right. Now let's move on to the third question. Let's see what is that. Okay. So this is a kind of exam type question. So something similar to this you have discussed in your lecture as well. But we may have a look at that here as well. On 1st of April 2019, the Silver PLC commenced drilling for oil from an undersea oil field under a government license. The terms of the license are that the Silver PLC will have to remove the drilling equipment at the end of its 5-year license. So the government have given you a kind of license to operate the drilling platform for a period of 5 years. This has an estimated cost of rupees 30 million on 31st March 2024. You need to remove as per the agreement at the end of the 5th year. In removing this particular oil platform, it will cost you. You have estimated it's rupees 30 million may cost you. So you can see that today we are in 1st of April 2019. It is supposed to remove from 31st March 2024 after its operation. And in that, you can see that the 5 years time. So the time period is more than one reporting period. So consequently, so you may have to take into account the time value of money. The Silver PLC's cost of capital is 8% per annum and rupees 1 has a present value of 68 cents in 5 years time. So therefore you are given the present value factor as well. Discounting factor is given, it is 0.68. If everything is provided, the expectation is to provide the extracts of a statement of financial position as at 31st March 2020 and a statement of profit or loss and other comprehensive income for the ended 31st March 2020 with respect to the above provision. With respect to the provision, what must be the accounting that you should do? That the question is about. So this is something I would like you to attempt. So you can take 10 minutes time for that and provide the extracts from statement of profit or loss and statement of financial position for the ended 31st March 2020. Right? Okay, give it a try. Right. Okay, you would have attempted. So shall we have a look at that? Fine. So let me copy the information first. Right. So here also, I believe it would be easy for us if we prepare a kind of account for the provision. So this is a provision for dismantling, right? Provision for dismantling, provision for dismantling oil platform. Here we have it, provision for dismantling oil platform. Okay, so it is something today we are in 1st of April 2019, and this is something that would take place in 5 years time. So therefore definitely you have to take the time value into consideration. Hence it's going to be 30 million into 0.68. That's what the discounting factor with what you are given. So consequently, once you get that, you can establish the provision at 20.4 million. 20.4 million. Now, since we are presenting the figures in thousand, so let me take 30,000. අපි මේවා දහස් සංඛ්‍යාවලින් present කරන නිසා මම මේක 30,000 කියලා ගන්නවා. Usually we present in so it's going to be 20,400, right? So this is the credit entry, and tell me what is the debit entry? This goes to what? So the credit entry goes to the provision account, while the debit entry goes to the oil platform PP, isn't it? Oil platform account, which is a PP asset. How am I claiming so? So can you remember when we are discussing about accounting for PP, accounting for property, plant and equipment, there we discuss. So when it comes to the cost of an item of PP, that has three types of cost. The first one is the purchase price. The second type of cost, the directly attributable cost, the cost of bringing the asset to the current location and condition. While the third one, it is the cost of dismantling and restoring the site on which the asset is located. So that is the third item. So therefore, this is necessarily a dismantling cost, the cost of dismantling. So therefore, it must be capitalized. So if you think about where the debit entry should go, it should go to the asset. Usually, when you come to the provision, you find that the debit entry goes to the expense account. But however, in instances where you have a dismantling and restoring related expenses, so that must be something that you should capitalize. So අපි දන්නා provision එක සාමාන්‍යයෙන් debit entry එක යන්නේ expense account එකකට. හැබැයි මෙතන මේක සුවිශේෂී තත්වයක්. මේක අපි ගෙනියන්නේ PPE asset එකකට. හේතුව තමයි අපිට මතකයි PP standard එක discuss කරද්දී PP item එක cost එකේ components තුනක් තිබුණා. Sub purchase price එක, අනිත් එක directly attributable cost, තුන්වෙනි එක තමයි the initial estimate of the cost of dismantling the site, cost of dismantling the asset and restoring the site on which the asset is located. So the dismantling cost එක කියන්නේ asset එකේ part එකක් වෙනවා. එහෙනම් debit entry කියන්නේ asset එකට. මෙතන අහන්නේ අපිට provision එක සම්බන්ධයෙන්. නමුත් මම මේක පැහැදිලි කරා මේක holistically ඔයා දකින්න ඕන නිසා. Fine. But this is not what is required. The question asking us to provide the extract as at 31st March 2020. So accordingly, once you do the discounting, the accounting treatment is that subsequently you need to compound this annually. And how do you compound that? You are multiplying that by the you're multiplying that by the same discounting rate what you had used. What was the discounting rate that we have used? We have discounted this at 8%. So therefore now you need to compound that at 8%. And that is a finance charge. So you can take this to the finance expenses. Finance expenses. Take it there. And you can take the total. It's 22,032. So the balance carried forward. There you have 22,032. And that is the balance as at 31st March 2020. So consequently, if you prepare the extracts from statement of profit or loss, extracts from statement of profit or loss for the year ended 31st March 2020. And also you can take the extracts from the statement of financial position as well. Statement of financial position. Not for the year ended, for asset. No? At 31st March 2020. Right. Let's take that. When come to the statement of profit or loss, there you have the finance cost 1,632. So this is all what you need to provide. And here we have rupees, and that's in thousand. And then you have the statement of financial position. There you have the non-current liability. So there under that we have provision for dismantling. Provision for dismantling. So in that you got the value, it's 22,030. So this is what gives you the full mark. So most of the cases what I have found that you are simply settling with the opening balance. But that is not the case. You can take the opening balance, but you need to add subsequently the finance cost. And then only you are getting into the correct answer, right? Okay, again it's in rupees 1,000. Rupees 1,000. Fine. So you can expect something similar to this in case of your examination as well. So therefore you can't have doubts on this. So if you have any, so please get them clarified. Is this clear to you? Getting this? Does that make sense? So would like to have some kind of feedback. Okay, it's fine. You are getting that, no? Good. Right, let's move on to the next question. What is that? Question number 4. So it gives you several scenarios, and the question is how those must be treated. Okay, we'll see. Explain how the following scenarios should be treated in the financial statements with reference to the LKS 37. The ABC PLC is a Sri Lankan firm which is specialized in the production of engineering products and related development activities. Just before the end of a year, the company received a notice of a legal case from one of its competitors. The case is related to potential infringement of the competitor's patent. Okay, so during the period, you have received a kind of notice that one of the competitors has filed a case against you, claiming that you have violated the patent right. So this is something very commonly seen. So if you can recall that even recently, so this may be 1 or 2 years back, that the Apple company has sued against the company Samsung, so claiming that they have violated some of their patent rights. So therefore, that is something pretty much seen in the practical world as well. The in-house legal counsel discussed the case with the ABC PLC's management, and based on the available information concluded that the lawsuit was possible. However, there was not enough information to estimate the potential liability. The things as such, now the question is how this must be treated. Simply putting, the question is whether you should make a provision for this or not. If it is not a provision, then how we are supposed to deal with that. So මෙතන අහන්නේ මේකෙක් scenario එකට අදාළව අපි මොකක්ද කරන්න ඕන කියන කාරණා. අපි provision එකක් කරන්න ඕනද? එහෙම නැත්නම් provision එකක් කරන්න අවශ්‍ය නැද්ද? ඒ provision එකක් කරන්න නැත්නම් අපි කොහොමද ඒක treat කරන්නේ? ඔය කියන කාරණා තමයි අහන්නේ. Okay. So I would like to ask you that considering this situation, just give me one answer. Should we make a provision or not? A provision එකක් කරන්න ඕනද නැද්ද? Just indicate. Okay, good. So the one has given the answer. Yes, correct. And tell me a simple reason for that. Give me one simple reason for that. Yes, you are correct. The one who has answered that, you are correct. And what is the reasoning? Even others, I would like to attempt that and give it a try. Then we'll see that they appreciate the one who has attempted that. Yes, good. Would like to see. Yes, without taking much time, let's have a look at that. So when you are given a question of this nature, the exercise is pretty much straightforward, right? What you have to do is, earlier in the very first question we discussed, in order to make a provision, there must be three conditions. There must be three conditions. Then, considering this situation, you need to decide whether these criterion, all the three criterion are there. All the three criteria are there. If all the three criteria are there, then you can say that you can make a provision. So let me take the three criteria what we have taken earlier. So this is it. Then we'll apply that to the given case and see whether all these three criteria are there. That's it. First one, there should be a present obligation. Present obligation can be a legal obligation or constructive obligation, right? Okay. So in this question, do we have a legal obligation? When it comes to the legal obligation, it can be in the form of by way of a contractual law, or by way of a kind of the provision in the Parliament Act, or it can be a kind of other law. For example, case law, right? Here, what is that? There's one of your competitors has filed a case against you. So therefore, there's clearly a legal obligation is there. You can see the legal obligation is present. Then my question is legal obligation right? What is the source? That is the case law, isn't it? So they have filed a case. So therefore, even if I am to give you the source of this, it's a case law. There's a legal obligation as a matter of case law. So the competitor has filed a case against you. So the first condition is there. In the settlement, is it probable that the resources embedding future economic benefits will flow to the entity? So if you read through the question says that the in-house legal counsel discussed the case with the ABC PLC's management, and based on the available information concluded that the lawsuit was possible. Lawsuit was possible. So therefore, it confirms that so you won't be able to successfully defend the case. The lawsuit was possible. So therefore, you may find guilty. You may find guilty. So if you find guilty, you know that when it comes to the settlement, it is probable that the resources would be taken out from the business. But මේ case එක අපිට දිනන්න තියෙන chance එක අඩුයි. ඒක අපි ගොඩක් වෙලාවට case එක defend කරගන්න බෑ අපිට. We won't be able to defend. So the in-house legal department is in opinion that you won't be able to successfully defend the case. That's why it says that they have concluded the lawsuit was possible. එතකොට එහෙමනම් case එක අපිට defend කරගන්න බැහැ. අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම අපිට මේකට ගෙවීමක් කරන්න සිද්ධ වෙනවා. There must be a compensation. So therefore, when it comes to settlement, it is probable that the resources and future benefits will flow from the entity. So therefore, the second condition is also present. Now the third one. What about the amount of the obligation? Can you reliably estimate that? The in-house legal counsel, discussed that. However, there was not enough information to estimate the potential liability. So you might have not come across an claim of this nature. So therefore, you do not have adequate information. You don't have enough information to estimate the potential liability. So therefore, the amount of the obligation cannot be measured, cannot be estimated reliably. So the third criterion is not there. It's not there, or it's absent. If the third criterion is not there, then what is that? It's not a provision, because in order to make a provision, all the three conditions must be there. But here you can see the first one is there, second one is there, however the third one is not there. So therefore, no provision should be made. Then what is the treatment that you should do? depending on the materiality. So if the claim is material, you need to make a disclosure. So you can consider this event as a contingent liability. Consider this as a contingent liability and disclose make a disclosure. Disclose the event. Disclose the scenario, disclose the event. In broad, it's an event. Disclose the event if material, right? If material, disclose it. That's how we do when it comes to the contingent liability. No recognition, but there can be a disclosure depending on the material. If the event is material, the financial impact could be material, then you need to disclose that. So it's a contingent liability, right? That's what the first scenario. Let's look at the second one. It says that the second one, a research agency is in a dispute with a client company, where the latter has accused that the former has infringed its copyright for a genetic material and is seeking damage of rupees 100 million. Further, a case has been filed in this respect against a research agency and it is being heard in the High Court. A research agency is in dispute with a client company, okay, where the latter has accused that the former has infringed its copyright for a genetic material and is seeking damages of 100 million. Okay. The research agency එකක් සහ තමන්ගේ client කෙනෙක් එක ප්‍රශ්නයක් ඇති වෙලා තියෙනවා, ආරවුලක් තියෙනවා, dispute එකක් තියෙනවා. එතකොට මේ client company එක කියනවා චෝදනා කරනවා research agency එකට එයාලා තමන්ගේ copyright එකක් infringe කරා, copyright එකක් violate කරා කියලා. එතකොට එතනදී damage එකක් බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා මිලියන 100ක damage එකක් බලාපොරොත්තු වෙලා නඩුවක් ෆයිල් කරනවා. එතකොට මේ නඩුව කෝට් එකේ ඇසෙමින් පවතිනවා. මේ රිපෝටින් ඩේට් එක වෙනකොට නඩුව කෝට් එකේ අහමින් පවතිනවා, right? එමුනා සිටුේෂන් එක මේ වගේ නම් අපි මොකක්ද කළ යුත්තේ? ඒතර අපි ගන්න ඕනේ මේකේ සිටුේෂන් එක තමයි අපි රිසර්ච් ඒජන්සි එක. අපි රිසර්ච් ඒජන්සි එක නම් මොකක්ද කරන්න ඕනේ? Yes, let's see. Disclose. Okay, good. We'll see. Says that the disclosure is needed. Are there any other views? Different views? Is it a disclosure? Yes, if you are a research agency, what you must do? That's the question is about. So again, what you have to do, take it and ask 3 questions. Ask the 3 questions. That's it. Let's see. Let's assess that against the three criterion. First one, the second criterion, and the third. A research agency is in dispute with the client company where the the client company has accused a research agency has infringed its copyright for a genetic material and is seeking damage of 100 million. Okay. Further, a case has been filed in this respect against the research agency and it is being heard in the High Court. The High Court නඩුව හැමින් පවතිනවලු. Okay. Should there be a present obligation? Is there a present obligation? That's the first question that you are going to ask. Here, say that someone will file a case against you in the court. So just because someone has filed a case against you, does that mean there's a present obligation? No. Just if someone has just filed a case against you, that does not mean that you have a present obligation, right? You need to assess that. You need to assess that particular obligation, whether that is the case. So here, it's a kind of accusation, right? It's not something confirmed, right? They simply accuse that the research agency has violated the copyright. But that does not mean that they have an obligation. So it is something that the court would decide, right? Or sometimes the in-house legal department could be of opinion, at the reporting date, like in the previous case. In the previous case, clearly, the in-house legal department says that, yes, there is a present obligation. The lawsuit was possible. But here there is nothing as such. The client has gone to the court and they have filed a case against you, accusing that you have violated the copyright, but that does not mean that the present obligation is there. And in fact, depending on the information what is being given, the case is being heard in the court. So maybe the case is in the initial stage of the kind of legal, the initial stage. අපි මේක initial stage එකේ තියෙන කේස් එකක් වෙන්න පුළුවන්. දැන් මේක කෝට් එකට ගියා විතරයි. ඒකට ඒකේ නඩු වාරයක් දෙකක් ගිහිල්ලා තියෙන්න පුළුවන්. එතකොට මෙතන දීලා තියෙන information එක අපිට කියන්න බෑ there is a present obligation. So therefore the very first criteria is missing. No. Then if it is not there, we don't have to go for the rest of the criteria. If the present obligation is not there, what it can be there can be a possible obligation, right? Possible obligation can be there. So if you can recall, when it comes to the contingent liability of two forms. What is that? The contingent liability could be a kind of present obligation. Present obligation is there, but one of the two recognition criteria are missing, like in the previous case. In the previous case, you can see that the present obligation is there. Also, the first recognition criteria gets satisfied. But the second one is missing. So therefore, even though there's a present obligation, you cannot make a provision. It's a contingent liability. Here what you have, it's a possible obligation. If it is a possible obligation, the obligation may come into existence as a matter of future events that is beyond the control of the entity. So therefore, sometimes the court may decide that you are guilty. So if the court finds that you are guilty, yes, there can be a kind of present obligation. But at the moment, so the case may be in a kind of very early stage. So therefore, at the moment, what you can see that there's a possible obligation. If it is a possible obligation, it is for sure a contingent liability. It's a contingent liability. This situation also, what you can do is you can disclose a contingent liability. Again, if the impact is material, because here you can see that the claim is 100 million, so it's a huge amount. So therefore, it is better to disclose this since the amount is material. So the disclosure is required. So contingent liability, you need to disclose that. Contingent liability, possible obligation here, contingent liability, present obligation is there. The present obligation is there, but it fails to satisfy the rest of the criteria. In the first case, in the second case, the first criterion is missing. So then it is for sure contingent liability. Yes, you are very correct with that respect. The final one. On December 12, 2019, the Puma PLC decided to outsource a division of their painting department. So the Puma PLC has decided to outsource one of their, to decide the painting division to be outsourced. On 20th December 2019, a detailed plan for the outsourcing of the division was agreed by the company and redundancy notices were sent to the staff of the division. Now we are going to lay off the employees, and you have given the redundancy notices as well. The Puma's reporting period ends on 31st December. Then now it is asked regarding this situation, regarding this scenario, what you are supposed to do. Simply putting, do you need to make a provision for that, or should you disclose a contingent liability? What is the requirement? Considering the situation, just give it a try. Inform your answer. What you're supposed to do with this respect. Yes, any attempt, if you consider that. So you need to do three simple aspects. That's it. Disclose. Okay. We'll see. Attempt is appreciated. On 12th of December, the Puma PLC decided to outsource a division. And then you have set the detailed plan for outsourcing that, and it was agreed by the company, and redundancy notices were sent to the staff of the division. And even the redundancy notices were sent. So when it comes to the situation as such, you need to assess whether you have the three criterion. That's all what you need to question. We'll see whether it is there. First one, there should be a present obligation. That's the first question it asks. If you lay off your employees, right, do you have a kind of obligation there? So if you are going to lay off the employees, right, do you have any obligation there? Certainly, you need to pay compensation, right? So if a particular employee is going to get kind of laid off, so what you need to do is that, so definitely you have to pay compensation. So especially if it is a kind of permanent staff member. So if it is a casual employee, yes, without much uh, obligation, so you can simply settle the outstanding. If there is any outstanding salary or something, you can simply pay that and you can lay that particular employee off. But especially when it comes to kind of permanent staff member, you need to follow a particular procedure. So you need to communicate the things in advance to that particular staff, and also you need to make a kind of compensation, maybe the salaries for the next 3 years or something, or the salaries for the next year. So likewise there are certain rules and regulation, so that is set out in law, so especially when it comes to laying off the employees. So this was something which was very prominent during the recent corona outbreak. You would have heard that. So the most of the employees from the hotel industry, most of the employees from the airline industry, so they were laid off, right? So in that the huge compensation would have paid. So accordingly, even when it comes to the situation here, you can see that they have taken a particular decision on 12th of December, and they have set the detailed plan for outsourcing, and also the company management, they have agreed on that, and finally they have uh, communicated that to the staff. They have communicated that to the staff. So accordingly, there's a present obligation. So in the process of laying them off, so then you need to fulfill certain obligation. So therefore, the present obligation is there. And when it comes to laying off these employees, as I mentioned, a kind of compensation has to be paid. So definitely the resources, the money would be taken out from the entity. It is there. And the obligation, amount of the obligation, yes, you can reasonably estimate that, because you know per employee how much to be paid as compensation, and for the employees you can estimate roughly how much that it would be. So therefore, for the year ended 31st December 2019, you can see all the three criterion are there. So therefore, you can make a provision. You can make a provision for that. For laying off the employees, the provision can be made, right? So that's your decision. So on what grounds that you have claimed that you should not make a provision for that? What led you to believe that it should be disclosed? So those who have answered, you can question on this. Why am I saying that the provision should be made? Your argument was that you cannot estimate the amount. Okay, good. Point is there. Good. Here, actually, in the question, it has not mentioned that what about the amount. But when you put it in the context, the business context, so when it comes to the kind of laying off the employees, it is not something a kind of difficult aspect to decide on the compensation, because everything is guided by the law. So there may be, especially when it comes to the kind of contract with the employee. In the contract, it is very correctly, or it is very specifically mentioned. So in case of a kind of redundancy, how it must be done, how it must be done. So even when it comes to the appointment of each and every staff member in any of the industries, any of the businesses, even in our case, we do experience the same. So what must be the procedure that is to be followed if a particular employee to be laid off. So there is a certain procedure. So even when it comes to a kind of temporary staff member, so there is a certain procedure to be followed. So the that particular person must be communicated 3 months in advance. If not, you are planning for a kind of sudden laying off. So you must need to pay 3 month salary, 3 months salary. So something like that. It is something straightforward aspect when it comes to estimating the amount of the obligation. So therefore, so we can consider that the estimation is something possible, right? Good. Point is there, right? So let's move on to the one final question. So again, this is something you have discussed in your lecture, accounting for the debentures, the financial liability. So this is something also important from your exams point of view. From your exams point of view, this is uh, also pretty much important. And I believe this is the question that we have worked out in the lecture. I think the same facts are there. On 1st of April 2019, Amara PLC issues 5 million debentures. And yes, 12% I showed at the premium. Yeah. So just have a look at that. In the tutorial, you have discussed this question. Do you want me to discuss this, or you can simply manage on what you have discussed in the lecture? මේ question එක අතර පුතා lecture එකේ discuss කරා. So කියන්න බලන්න මේ question එක අපි discuss කළ යුතුද නැත්නම් පුතාලට ඒක manage කරගන්න පුළුවන්ද? Because the same question. If it were a kind of different question, I will definitely discuss. So if you find that it is something need not, then I can simply skip on that. You want to discuss, right? Okay, better. We'll take that. Let's read the question first. On 1st of April 2019, Amaya PLC issued rupees 5 million of debentures to Asita PLC. The debentures have a life of 5 years and they offer interest payable at the end of each financial year at a rate of 12% per annum. So the 12%, that is your coupon. The debentures are issued at rupees 5.389079 million after incurring issue cost of 10,000. Issue cost is given, the transaction cost, and the price at which these debentures are issued is also given. The debentures will be redeemed at par, the face value, and at its maturity. The market requires a rate of return of 10% per annum on such securities. We call it the required rate of return or the effective interest rate. Effective interest rate. To provide the journal entries for the initial recognition of financial liability in the financial statements of Amaya, and calculate the interest expense for the year and also carrying amount at the end of the lifetime of this particular instrument. Okay. So let's take the question and see. So it would be easy if we take a kind of account. Let's take account and then thereafter we may provide the journal entries. So let's take kind of, well, here we have the debenture, right? Right. So initially what you have to do, you need to kind of recognize. So when it comes to the financial liabilities, basically you account for the liabilities using the amortized cost, right? So the liabilities must be measured at amortized cost. But initially you need to recognize them at the kind of fair value. So that's what we call the amortized cost may come to the subsequent accounting. So the financial asset එකක් වේවා financial liability එකක් වේවා මුලින්ම අපි කොහොමත් අඳුනගන්නේ fair value එකට තමයි. හැබැයි subsequently ඒක treat කරන different methods තියෙනවා. එකක් අපි කියනවා amortized cost එකට. liability එකට තියෙන default accounting treatment එක තමයි financial liability එකට තියෙන default accounting treatment එක තමයි measuring them at amortized cost. amortized cost එකට measure කරන එක. ඒ වගේම සමහර අවස්ථා තියෙනවා අපි financial liability එකක් අපිට measure කරන්න පුළුවන් fair value එකට. But that is applicable for most of the time derivative financial statements. ඒක ගොඩක් වෙලාවට අදාළ වෙන්නේ derivative financial instruments වලට කියලා අපි කියනවා. ඒක පුතාලගේ level එකේ ඒක applicable වෙන්නේ නැහැ. Like share options, something like that, right? The forward agreements, share options, the futures. Definitely you'll be discussing those aspects in your advanced studies, especially in finance. So therefore we can say generally the financial liabilities are measured at amortized cost subsequently, right? Then if you have a kind of financial asset or liability that is measured at other than the fair value. So let me put it like this, right? You know, when it comes to the assets or liability, you can measure the financial liabilities or financial assets at fair value through profit or loss. So අපි assets වල අපිට හම්බෙන්නේ නැති financial liabilities වලක් තියෙනවා කියලා මම කිව්වා. සමහර assets වල classification එක, සමහර financial liabilities වල classification එක තමයි financial asset at fair value through profit or loss. නැත්නම් financial liabilities at fair value through profit or loss කියන එක. ඒතකොට මේ category එකට යන asset එක නම් අපි දන්නවා transaction cost එකක් තිබුණොත් අපි මොකක්ද කරන්නේ? ඒක අපි P&L එකට charge කරන්න ඕනේ. එහෙම නැති අවස්ථාවල transaction cost එකක් තිබුණොත් අපි ඒක capitalize කරන්න ඕනේ. එතකොට තියෙන්න පුළුවන් සමහර අවස්ථා මීට වෙනස් වෙන අවස්ථා මොනවද? Financial liabilities or financial asset at amortized cost තියෙන්න පුළුවන් නේ. amortized cost. එතකොට financial asset සම්බන්ධයෙන් අපි දන්නවා financial asset at fair value through other comprehensive income කියලා category එකක් තිබ්බනේ. assets accounting for assets lecture එකේදී අපි මේවා පොඩ්ඩක් touch කරා, right? ඒ දේවල් චුට්ටක් recall කරන්න ඕනේ. මෙතන මට point එකක් තමයි ගේන්න ඕනේ වුණේ මේ transaction cost කොහොමද account කරන්නේ කියන එක. එතකොට කොහොමද financial asset එකක් හරි financial liability එකක් හරි amortized cost එක. එහෙම නැත්නම් P&L එකට වඩා වෙනස් ක්‍රමයක measure කරනවා නම් අපි කියන transaction cost එක capitalize කරන්න ඕනේ කියලා. Transaction cost be capitalized කරන්න ඕනේ. transaction cost එක. මේක තමයි transaction cost එක සම්බන්ධයෙන් තියෙන treatment එක. transaction cost. ඒතකොට අපි බැලුවොත් මෙතන debenture එක අපි කිව්වා ඒක measure කරන්නේ amortized cost එකට කියලා. එහෙනම් transaction cost එකක් තිබුණොත් අපි මොකක්ද කරන්නේ? ඒක debenture account එකට තමයි දාන්නේ, P&L එකට දාන්නේ. අපිට අදාළ වෙන treatment එක මේක. ඒතකොට අපිට එහෙනම් මේක generally මතක තියාගන්න පුළුවන් asset එකක් හෝ liability එකක් fair value through profit or loss නෙමෙයි නම් ඒ category එක අනිත් සෑම වෙලාවකම transaction cost එක capitalize කරනවා කියලා. එහෙම නැත්නම් අපිට එකින් එකට මතක තියාගන්න වෙනවනේ. කොහොමද financial asset එකක් amortized cost එකට measure කරන්නේ? කොහොමද financial asset එකක් fair value through other comprehensive income measure කරන්නේ? නැත්නම් financial liability එකක් amortized cost එකට measure කරන්නේ කොහොමද? මේවා එකින් එකට මතක තියාගන්න වෙනවා. නිසා එහෙම කරන්නේ නැතුව අපි එක දෙයක් දැනගෙන හිටියනම් හරි financial asset එකක් හරි liability එකක් හරි ඒකේ category එක financial asset through profit or loss නම් ඒක අපි transaction cost එක charge කරන්න P&L එකට. එහෙම නැත්නම් ඒ category එක වෙනස් නම් එතනදී capitalize කිරීම තමයි treatment එක. right? okay. initially අපි කියව fair value එකට recognize කරන්න කියලා. fair value එක කීයද? cash අපිට හම්බ වෙනවා debenture issue කරපුවාම question එකේ කියන විදිහට 5,389,000. 5,389,079. හරි. මිලියන 5යි 389,79ක් හම්බ වෙනවා. right? එතකොට ඔන්න අපි proceed එකට අපි record කරා. So that is the initial treatment. ඊට පස්සේ අපිට කියනවා transaction cost එකක් තියනවලු 10000. එතකොට අපි කිව්වා දැන් මේක amortize cost එකට තමයි යන්නේ. liabilities දාලා level එකේ ඔක්කොම තියෙන amortize cost P&L කියන එක මම කිව්වා නැහැ. ඒවා extreme asset liabilities වලට එන්නේ. ඒකට ඒවා අපිට අදාළ නැති නිසා අපි දන්නවා ඒක amortize cost එකට යන්න ඕනේ කියලා liability එකක්, financial liability එකක්. එහෙමනම් අපි treatment එක තමයි capitalization. එතකොට අපි බැලුවොත් incur කරලා තියෙන මේ cost එක. ඒ කියන්නේ අපි cash ගෙව්වා, cash credit වුණා. එහෙනම් මේක debit වෙන්න ඕනේ මෙතෙන්ට. ඒකට අපිට ගන්න පුළුවන් cash 10000 කියලා. right 10000. එතකොට මෙතන අපිට පේනවා net impact එකක් තියෙනවා. එතකොට usually මෙහෙම කරත් කිසිම වැරැද්දක් නැහැ. cash credit කරලා debit කරලා ඒක තමයි සිද්ධ වෙන්න ඕනේ. නමුත් අපි සාමාන්‍යයෙන් කරන්නේ initial point එකේ recognize කරනකොට මේක තේරුමක් නැහැනේ. cash debit කරනවා එක පැත්තකින් අනිත් පැත්තෙන් cash credit කරනවා. එහෙම නැතුව අපි net proceed එකට ගන්න පුළුවන් නේ. එමනම් 10000ක් debit වුණාම වෙන්නේ මේක මෙතනින් 10000ක් අඩු වෙන එක. එහෙනම් අපිට පුළුවන් නේද මේ entry එක වෙනුවට අයින් කරලා මෙතනින් ඒ 10000 අඩු කරලා දාන්න. එහෙම නැත්නම් simply net proceed එකට හඳුන ගන්න. 5,379,079. So usually this is how we do. සාමාන්‍යයෙන් අපි මේ විදිහට තමයි කරන්නේ. net amount එකට identify කරනවා. right? අර විදිහට කරත් වැරද්දක් නැහැ. නමුත් අපි සාමාන්‍යයෙන් කරන්නේ ඒක තමයි practice එක. ඊට පස්සේ අපි කියනවා you need to consider the interest expense. So how do you take the interest expense? It is simply, in case of amortized cost, how you are supposed to do, take the amount outstanding at the beginning of the period and get them multiplied by the effective interest rate. And that is your interest expense. So the debenture account gets credit while it gets debit to the kind of interest expense. So consequently, I can take it, it's, amount outstanding 5,379,079 multiplied by effective interest rate. The question gives you it is to be 12% if I'm not mistaken. It says 10%. Sorry, it's 10%. So this is your interest expense. For the first year, this is the interest expense. Then what? In case of debentures, you know, time to time, the business would have to pay a dividend. Business would have to pay a dividend. When you are paying the dividend, you always take the face value of the debenture and you would make the kind of payment of the coupon. So in this question, the face value of the debenture is 5 million. 5 million, that is the face value. It's multiplied by 12%, that is your kind of coupon. So therefore, this is what you had paid out of cash. Then that is the accounting for the first year. So at the end of the first year, you can take the value. You can take the value, outstanding amount. Sorry. It is called the balance carried forward. And here you get that it's 5,916,987 minus C77. It's 5,316,987. This is the carrying amount at the end of the year, right? And what is this? And this is what we call the amortized cost. Amortized cost. So අපි amortized cost කියන්නේ මොකේද? මෙන්න මේ ලැබුණු අගයට තමයි අපි කියන්නේ amortized cost එක කියලා. Initially අපි recognize කරන්නේ fair value less transaction cost වලට amortized cost එකට measure කරන නිසා subsequently ඒකයි අපි initial accounting. ඊට පස්සේ අපි interest expense එක compute කරා at the effective interest rate. ඊට පස්සේ අපි ගත්තා coupon rate එක. මෙතෙන්ට එන amount එකට අපි කියනවා amortized cost. ඒකට කොහොමද ඔය කියන financial instrument standard එකේ define කරන්නේ amortized cost කියන එක. එතනදී කියන්නේ මේ වගේ දෙයක්. It takes that first you take the amount outstanding at the beginning of the period, right? Then calculate the interest expense applying the effective interest rate to the amount outstanding at the beginning of the period. And this is what you did. And then deduct the coupon. Deduct the coupon. What you get, that is amortized cost. The standard එකේ amortized cost කියන්නේ කොහොමද පැහැදිලි කරන්නේ? කොහොමද නිර්වචනය කරන්නේ? Standard එකේ කියන්නේ financial instrument standard එක CFRS 9 LKS 32 මේ කියන standards වලින් කොහොමද මේක define කරන්නේ? සරම අපිට කියනවා amount outstanding at the beginning of the period ගන්නලු. Right. එහෙනම් amount outstanding at the beginning of the period ඔන්න මේ amount එක. ඊට පස්සේ කියනවා add කරන්නලු in case of a liability, case of a liability, interest expense. You need to add the interest expense. How do you take that? Applying the effective interest rate to the amount outstanding at the beginning of the period. කාලච්ඡේදයේ ආරම්භයේ තිබ්බ amount outstanding අගයට apply කරන්නලු මොකක්ද? Effective interest rate. Question එකේ කිව්වා 10%. ඒක apply කරලා ගන්නලු interest expense. ඒක add කරන්නලු amount outstanding at the beginning of the period. ඊට පස්සේ කියනවා deduct the coupon. ඊට පස්සේ කියනවා coupon එක අඩු කරන්නලු. coupon එකක් සෑම වෙලාවකම ගන්නේ face value එකට. ඒතකොට face value එක මේකේ 5 million ඒක වෙනස් වෙන්නේ නැහැ. ඒකට අපි 112ක් තමයි හැමදාම ගෙවාගෙන යන්නේ. ඒක තමයි coupon. ඒ coupon එක අඩු කරපුවම ලැබෙන්නේ මොකක්ද? අන්න ඒකටලු කියන්නේ amortized cost කියලා. Alright? That's it. So this would be the accounting for the first year. So the question would ask you what is the interest expense for the year ended 31st March 2020. This is the interest expense. And yeah, that's what it asks. And thereafter it asks the initial journal entry as well. So if you have to provide that, so now you have already done that. So you can get cash 5,379,079 and credit 5,379,079. It is debenture. net amount එකට අඳුර ගන්න පුළුවන්. එහෙම නැත්නම් කෙනෙක්ට හිතෙන්න පුළුවන් දැන් මම මේක gross amount එකට අඳුර ගන්නවා ප්‍රශ්නයක් නැහැ. එහෙමනම් කොහොමද cash debit කරන්න 5,389, right? 389 and 79. ඊට debentures credit කරන්න කීයක්ද? 5,389,079. ඊට පස්සේ transaction cost එක ගන්න. එතනදී මොකක්ද කරන්නේ? debentures debit කරන්න. debentures debit 10,000. 1000 debit කරන්න. ඒක credit කරන්න cash. ඒකට මේක cumulative effect එක තමයි උඩ තියෙන්නේ නේ. cash වලට 5,389.79 debit වෙලා credit වුණොත් net amount එක මේ තියෙන්නේ. ඒ ගාන තමයි debenture වලට credit කරන්නේ. කැමති විදියකට journal entry එක provide කරන්න පුළුවන්. එහෙනම් මෙන්න journal entry එක recognize කරගන්න අපේ initial liability එක ඊට පස්සේ interest expense එක calculate කරන්න කිව්වා. මෙන්න තියෙනවා interest expense එක. මේ amount එක මම different color එකකින් ගන්නවා. මේක තමයි amortized cost එක. amortized cost කියන්නේ මොකක්ද කියලා අහුවොත් මේක තමයි amortized cost එක. එහෙනම් මේ account එක අපිට ඉස්සරහටත් අරගෙන යන්න පුළුවන්. මොකද 2024 තත්ත්වය අහනවනේ. දැන් simply මේ steps ටික continue කරන්නයි තියෙන්නේ. සෑම වෙලාවකම ඔය කියන steps ටික තමයි තියෙන්නේ. අවුරුදු 4කට 5කට මම මේක දාගෙන යන්නම්. right. එහෙනම් අපි දෙවෙනි අවුරුද්දේ ඉන්නේ interest expense එක calculate කරන්න සෑම වෙලාවකම amount outstanding at the beginning of the period apply the interest. coupon එක හැමදාම මම කියව වෙනස් වෙන්නේ නැහැ. ලක්ෂ 6යි. outstanding, 5,200,000 5,248,689. ඊළඟ අවුරුද්දේ ඒක balance brought forward ඉස්සරහට ගන්න ආපහු interest expense එක calculate කරන්න. වෙනි අවුරුද්දේ දැන් අපි ඉන්නේ කීයද? amount outstanding at the beginning of the period multiplied by 10%. coupon එක වෙනස් වෙන්නේ නැහැ ලක්ෂ 6මයි. ඒක throughout the lifetime of the instrument. It's not going to change. Coupon. දැන් අවුරුද්ද පටන් ගත්තා අපහු interest expense එකක් calculate කරන්න 1% coupon එක ගෙවන්න ලක්ෂ 6ක් ඉතුරු ප්‍රමාණය amortized cost එක මම හිතන්නේ 4 වෙනි අවුරුද්ද හෝ 4 වෙනි අවුරුද්ද අවසානයේ right ඊළඟ finally ඒකට ආවා balance brought forward තියෙනවා මේ amount එක ගත්තා ඒක calculate කරන්න interest expense එක 1% ඒක තමයි interest expense එක the double entry කියන්නේ කොහොමද debenture account gets credit while the interest expense get debit right it's not the coupon what we call the expense but it is the interest expense so you may get this plus the E90 you can see that at the end what has happened the question said that it is redeemed at the face value දැන් බලන්න අපි මේ අවුරුදු ගාන account කරගෙන ආවට පස්සේ අපිට පේනවා මේක 1 රුපිය එකක් එහෙම වෙනවා 5 million වලට ඇවිල්ලා තියෙනවා question එකේ අපි කියවුවොත් question එක අවසානයේ කියනවා මේක redeem කරනවා කියලා face value එකට හරියටම කාලච්ඡේදයේ අවසානයේ මේක face value එකට ඇවිල්ලා තියෙනවා අවුරුදු 5 අවසානයේ මෙතනදී අපි ගෙවනවා cash on cash අපි 5 million ගෙවලා sorry cash 5 million ගෙවලා අපිට පුළුවන් liability එක නිදහස් කරන්න. එහෙනම් ඔන්න අපි debenture එක ජීවිත කාලේ පුරාවටම account කරලා බැලුවා. ඒතර අවුරුදු 5 අවසානයේ ඔන්න අපි settle කරලා තියෙනවා. Get that? So this is how you account for the financial liability. So you can have questions, you can ask those questions. තව ප්‍රශ්න තියෙන්න පුළුවන්. එතකොට අහන්න. මොනවද ප්‍රශ්න කියන එක. මම හිතනවා coupon rate කියන එක පැහැදිලි ඇති කියලා. coupon rate කියන එක straight forward නේ. instrument එකේ තියෙන value එක. instrument එකේ තියෙන guaranteed return එක. එතකොට මොකක්ද මේ effective interest rate කියන්නේ? effective interest rate කියන්නේ that is the real return of this instrument. The real return. So this is from the point of view of the kind of issuer. So therefore, that is the real cost of the instrument. I would say the real cost. So that is not the coupon rate, but it is the real cost to the entity of this instrument. මේ instrument එකේ තියෙන real cost එක. කොහොමද එහෙම කියන්නේ? ඒතර මේ real cost එක කියන්නේ මොකක්ද? Real cost කියන්නේ can you recall in your A levels you would have learned about the IRR, the return which make the rate which make the NPV 0. NPV 0 වෙන rate එකනේ අපි කිව්වේ IRR කියලා. ඒතකොට ඒ කියන්නේ ඒ project එකේ තියෙන real return. ඒ project එකෙන් දෙන ඇත්තම return එකනේ IRR. එහෙමනම් මේ effective interest rate කියන්නේ nothing but the IRR. Right? So remember, effective interest rate equals the IRR or the real cost of the instrument. Real cost of the instrument. Like the real return of a project, that is IRR, EIR, that is the effective interest rate, that is the real cost of the instrument. So how do you claim that? So we can prove that. In year 0, how much would you get from this instrument? By issuing this instrument, you get 5,379 and 79. අපි පළවෙනි අවුරුද්ද අවසානයේ මේ ඉන්ස්ට්‍රුමන්ට් එකෙන් කීයක් අපිට හම්බ වෙනවද ඉෂුව කරපුවාම මිලියන 5,379යි 79ක් හම්බ වෙනවා නේ. මේක තමයි මේ amount එක. ඊට පස්සේ අපි අවුරුදු 5ක් පුරාවට මේකට payment කරගෙන යනවා නේ. Isn't it? We make payment for this particular instrument for 5 years. First year, how much? කීයක් ගෙවනවද ඇත්තටම? ලක්ෂ 6ක් ගෙවනවා නේ. That is the coupon. අපි coupon එකක් ගෙවාගෙන යනවානේ. ලක්ෂ 6ක් coupon ගෙවනවා. ඒත් සෑම අවුරුද්දකම මේ වගේ cash outflow එකක් තියෙනවානේ. හැම අවුරුද්දෙම ලක්ෂ 6 ගානේ ගෙවාගෙන යනවා. ඒ අවසාන අවුරුද්දේ ලක්ෂ 6ක් ගෙවන්න ඕන අනිවාර්යෙන් interest. ඒත් එක්කම මේ instrument එක නිදහස් කරන්නත් ඕනේ නේ. 5 million ගෙවලා instrument එක redeem කරන්නත් ඕනේ. එතකොට ඒකත් අපිට consider කරන්න වෙයි. මේ තමයි instrument එකේ අපේ තියෙන cash outflows. දැන් project එක මේකේ අනිත් පැත්තනේ. Initial cash outflow followed by the cash inflows. But here in this instrument, initial cash inflow followed by cash outflows නේ. ඒක instrument එකේ nature එකත් එක්ක. එතකොට question එකේ දීලා තියෙනවානේ මේක 10% කියලා. ඒතකොට 10% කියන්නේ මොකක්ද? දැන් අපි මේකේ IRR work out කරොත් internal rate of return එක work out කරොත් ඒ එන rate එක තමයි හරියටම බලන්න 10ක්. මම මේක mathematically using the Excel මම මේක calculate කරලා පෙන්නන්නම් IRR. ඒ calculation එක බොහොම පහසුයි. අපිට තියෙන්නේ equal IRR කියලා ගත්තා. right. මේ ඔක්කොම cash flows ටික select කරන්න. select කරලා okay කියන්න. right. Here you get the IRR. See, this is the IRR. ඔන්න 10ක් කියලා ඇවිල්ලා තියෙනවා IRR. එහෙනම් ඒක තමයි effective interest rate. එතකොට එහෙනම් මේ 10න් මේ කියන cash flows ටික අපි discount කරොත් අපිට දකින්න හම්බෙයි මේ instrument එකේ තියෙන NPV එක නැත්නම් present value එක 0. නම් to confirm yourself just discount these cash flows. discount කරලත් බලන්න 1.1%. So this is just for your knowledge. මොකක්ද මේ IRR කියන එක ගැන doubt එකක් තිබ්බොත් just clarify කරන්න මේක help කරයි. එතකොට මේක දැනගැනීමේ අවශ්‍යතාවයක් නැහැ කිසිම. right, just to add something in addition, right? So therefore never get confused that you would be tested up to this. No, that is not something there. You know just what is IRR, that's it. But just wanted to show you what this IRR really means. Here it's 1 since it is here 1. So you can simply multiply this and get that. You can simply take this. මේ විදිහට අපි ප්‍රොජෙක්ට් එක ඩිස්කවුන්ට් කරන්නේ නේ. ඊපස්සේ අපි මෙතෙන්ට අරගෙන බැලුවොත් IR NPV එක එහෙම නැත්නම් present value, see it's 0. So therefore it confirms that the real cost of this particular instrument to the entity is not 12%, though it is seems 12% is what you pay, but what is the real cost? That is 10%. That's why it is said that when you are going to recognize the expense, recognize that at the real cost. That's why we recognize the interest expense at the effective interest rate, not at the kind of what you call the coupon rate. So අන්න ඒ නිසායි මේ අපිට කියන්නේ interest expense එක අඳුන ගැනීමේදී effective interest rate එකට අඳුන ගන්න. මොකද effective interest rate එක තමයි මේ instrument එකේ ඇත්තම cost එක. ඒක මේ දීලා තියෙන coupon rate එක නෙමෙයි. right? ඒක තමයි point. That's the point what I just wanted to clarify. So I'll be uploading this answer sheet as well, so when you can refer that while you are studying, right? ඒකට ඔයාලට මේ answer sheet එක use කරන්න පුළුවන්. right? So other than that, do you have any questions? Would like to give you a kind of clarification. පැහැදිලි කිරීමක් දෙන්න පුළුවන්. පැහැදිලි නැති දේවල් තියෙනවා නම් question කරන්න. anything that you're not getting, whatever. Anything is a valid question. So if you have any doubt, yes. Is that clear what we discuss in the final question? Would like to hear a feedback. So as per the time schedule, this is going to be the final week. So therefore, that's all what it seems what we can discuss. But so depending on your request, even I'm ready to do a kind of another session. So that is to help you, to provide you with a kind of extended support if needed, even in the last next week. At the same time, I can take you through the kind of the what do you call that, the leases, accounting for leases. I can take you through if you find that is useful. You can have that. So I would like to have your views on that. ඔබට අවශ්‍ය නම් දැන් අද තමයි officially මේකේ අවසාන week එක. ඔබට අවශ්‍ය නම් මට පුළුවන් next week එකෙත් මේ time slot එකම අරගෙන 3 to 5 ඔයාලට tute එකක් කරන්න what is that, leases, lease accounting සම්බන්ධයෙන් tute එකක් කරන්න පුළුවන්. So if you find it difficult, if you find it needed, right? So I would like to hear a few more of you. So only if you find it useful, would be able to do that. Just give your views on that, right? Right. Yes, there's a request that can you please explain? I believe that depending on the environment, so today even the kind of the curfew is going to be imposed from not tonight, but tomorrow midnight, I believe. The curfew is going to be kind of imposed. So therefore, so we can reasonably estimate. We can reasonably estimate that your exams would be postponed. That's what I think. මේ තියෙන environment එකත් එක්ක මම හිතන්නේ නැහැ exam එකක් කරගන්න පුළුවන් වෙයි කියලා. Isn't it? So the situation, the environment is getting worse and worse, isn't it? So I think that that would be the case. So therefore, so yes, some of you would request that to go for a tutorial on lease. Okay, then considering that, I might even take one more tutorial for you that is on lease, right? In the next week also we meet in the same schedule. And apart from that, one question was there. Is that can you please explain warranty provision account? Warranty provision account, I believe that it may be relating to the one we have discussed on the drilling platform, I believe. That is what you may be questioning. මම හිතන්නේ මේ drilling platform එක කොහොමද account කරේ කියන එක කාරණාව. එතනත් තියෙන ඇත්තටම discounting සහ compounding. So if I'm just to brief you again on this situation, you know, here today we are in 1st of January 2019, and you have a particular liability that is to be settled in like 5 years time. It's on 31st March 2024. You need to settle, or you need to kind of remove the drilling platform, right? So you need to remove that drilling platform and you need to cease your operation. But අපේ operations නවත්තලා මේ තියෙන drilling platforms ගලවලා අයින් කරලා environment එක restore කරන්න ඕනේ අපි අවුරුදු 5කින්. අද අපි ඉන්නේ 2019 4/1. එතකොට in that particular situation අපිට පේනවා අපි incur කරන්න ඕනේ මේ cost එක 30 million. හැබැයි අපි අද account කරනකොට මේ 30 billion මේ accounts වලට ගන්න බැහැනේ, because the time value of money is significant, because it's a huge time period. It's 5 years. 5 years. It's a huge time period. So therefore, you need to discount this value and take the value today to the today's account. So consequently, if you are to, let me take this in thousands, 30,000, right? So it's rupees thousands. The kind of cost of capital is given 8%. So make a 8% වලින් අපි discount කරන්න ඕනේ. So සාමාන්‍යයෙන් අපි කරන්නේ කොහොමද? When come to the discounting, you take 30,000 divided by 1 plus 0.08 to the power 5 දාලා discount කරා නම් අද value එක එනවා. හැබැයි එච්චර දෙයක් කරන්න අවශ්‍ය නැහැ. මොකද question එකේ කෙලින්ම කියනවා කියන value එක කීයක්ද? 0.68 කියලා. එහෙනම් අපිට තියෙන්නේ මේ amount එක multiply කරලා ගන්න. 30,000 multiplied by 0.68. එහෙනම් මෙන්න 20400 අද වටිනාකම අපි ගත්තා. right? 12,000 as yeah. right. 20,400 ගත්තා. ඒක තමයි අද වටිනාකම. ඊට පස්සේ අපි දන්නවා මේක අවුරුදු 5කින් 30,000 වෙන්න ඕනේ. ඒතකොට ඒක වෙන්නේ කොහොමද? Today the value is 20,400. But you want to ensure that in 5 years time it is getting to 30,000. Then how do you ensure? Earlier you discount using the 8%. Now you can simply compound at 8%. So if you keep doing that, at the end of the 5th year, this becomes 30,000. So that's why we annually charge an interest expense. We are simply compounding. දැන් අපි මේක කලින් discount කරා දැන් ඔන්න annually compound කරගෙන එනවා. මොකද අපි දන්නවා 20400 නෙමෙයි අවුරුදු 5කින් තියෙන්න ඕනේ. අවුරුදු 5කින් 30000 තියෙන්න ඕනේ. ඒ නිසා තමයි අපි මේක compound කරගෙන ඉදිරියට යන්නේ. ඒකට අවුරුදු 5යි වරනකොට ඔක 30000ක් වෙයි. 30000 වුණාට පස්සේ cash credit කරා 30,000 debit කරා provision account එකට 30,000 ඔන්න liability එක settle වෙලා යනවා. එහෙමයි accounting උනේ right. ඒතර question එකේ වෙලා තියෙන්නේ second question එකේ ඇයි 120,000 balance carried forward ගත්තේ. මේක පුතා හරියට provision for doubtful debts වගේ. provision for doubtful debts, provision for bad debts. ඒතර warranty එකක් set කරන පළවෙනි අවස්ථාවේ අපි කොහොමද ගන්නෙ? You debit the expense and you credit the warranty provision. Take it as the balance carried forward. Then in the next year from this provision you may incur some expenses. සමහර වියදම් දරනවා. ඒතකොට provision එකට අනුව දරන්න වෙන වියදම් අපි දැන් ලාභයෙන් අයින් කරලා තියෙන ලක්ෂයක් ඒ ලක්ෂයේ තුලින් අපි මේවා වියදම් දරනවා. ඊට පස්සේ මෙතන 120,000 ගත්තේ මොකද question එකේ කියනවා at the end of the year you have sold 300 you have sold 300 machines 300ක් විකුණලා තියෙනවා. ඊට පස්සේ ඒ machine 300ක් අපි හිතනවා තාමත් issues තියෙයි කියලා එකක issues තිබුණොත් අපිට 2000ක් දරන්න වෙනවා. එහෙනම් එතන අපි 300 into 20% ඒක තමයි problem තියෙන්න පුළුවන් machine සංඛ්‍යාව. ඒ කියන්නේ 60ක් 62000න් වැඩි වුණොත් 1,20,000. ඒක තමයි කාලච්ඡේදයේ අවසානයේ. එහෙම නැත්නම් 31st March 2020 වලට තියෙන්න ඕනේ provision එක. එතකොට මේ විදිහම තමයි අපි කරන්න ඇත්තේ provision for doubtful debt එකක් maintain කරනකොටත්. If you are doing that for the second year, you first take the balance carried forward figure. ඒක අරගත්තට පස්සේ only the movement in the provision account is what we recognize as the kind of liability, what we recognize as the expense. That is 90,000. तर දෙවෙනි අවුරුද්ද අවසානයේ තියෙන ඕනේ 1,20,000ක්. කාලච්ඡේදය ආරම්භයේ ලක්ෂයක් තිබ්බා. එකෙන් 70ක් ගියා 30ක් ඉතුරුයි. එහෙනම් මේ අවුරුද්දේ ලාභයෙන් 90,000ක් අයින් කරගත්තා නම් ඇති. That's the problem, right? Okay. Okay, you would have taken that. So thank you very much. Then that's what we can discuss for the day. Then see you in the next class and we will discuss the tutorial on leases. Right. Thank you.